When we turn 60, something begins to shift, quietly, almost invisibly at first. The world doesn't change overnight, but our relationship to it does. The things that once thrilled us, success, approval, a new purchase, a sweet dessert, don't light up the brain the way they used to. And that's not weakness, that's biology. You see, the dopamine system, the brain's pleasure and motivation chemical, changes with age. It's not that dopamine disappears, it's that the brain's sensitivity to it evolves. The highs don't feel as high, the rewards don't feel as urgent, and what once felt essential suddenly feels optional. For many people, this change can feel like loss. You wake up and wonder, why doesn't this excite me anymore? But what's really happening is a shift from dopamine-driven desire to serotonin-driven satisfaction, from wanting more to finding peace with less. The brain begins to value stability, calm, and connection over novelty and intensity. It's not decline, it's recalibration. In your younger years, your dopamine system was like a race car, fast, reactive, chasing every thrill. After 60, it becomes more like a sailboat, slower, but guided by wind and wisdom. The same brain that once craved speed now starts craving meaning. Something subtle begins to happen when we reach our 60s. The colors of life don't fade, but they soften. The music still plays, but the notes sound different. You might notice it one morning. That cup of coffee you've loved for decades doesn't feel quite the same. The excitement of a new gadget, a compliment, or even a small success feels muted. You wonder, what's wrong with me? But the truth is, nothing is wrong. What's changing is the very chemistry of how your brain experiences pleasure. For most of our lives, we're driven by a chemical called dopamine. It's the brain's motivation messenger, the spark that says, go after it, chase that feeling, you'll be happier once you get it. Dopamine gives us focus, excitement, anticipation, but it also creates the constant tension of craving. The feeling that happiness lives somewhere just ahead of us, one achievement away, one click away, one more taste, one more purchase. When you're young, your brain is flooded with dopamine activity. It's wired for novelty and reward. Every experience feels like a discovery. But as the decades pass, the dopamine system naturally recalibrates. Receptors become less sensitive, not because you're broken, but because your brain is growing wiser. It begins to protect you from the exhausting roller coaster of endless pursuit. This is why many people in their 60s describe feeling calmer, but also confused. The highs don't feel as high, the rewards don't sparkle the same way. That's not emotional dullness, it's biological evolution. The brain is quietly shifting its focus from intensity to stability, from chasing pleasure to sustaining balance. But our culture rarely tells us this. We live in a dopamine-saturated world, a society built on the belief that more stimulation means more life. When your brain slows its chase, the world makes you feel like you're falling behind. You're not. You're just stepping out of the dopamine race. Imagine your younger brain as a fast sports car, sleek, powerful, but always hungry for more fuel. In your 60s, that car transforms into a sailboat. It doesn't need to speed anymore. It learns to move with the wind, to find direction through awareness rather than acceleration. That's what dopamine recalibration feels like. Slower, yes, but infinitely more stable. This shift can feel disorienting at first. You may crave the old rush, the quick reward, the thrill that used to come so easily. But if you resist the urge to chase it, something extraordinary happens. You start noticing smaller joys. The warmth of sunlight on your face, the texture of silence, the presence of someone who listens. These begin to feel richer, fuller, more alive. That's because when dopamine settles, serotonin and oxytocin, the chemicals of peace and connection, finally have room to speak. Pleasure becomes less about getting more and more about feeling enough. So when life feels different after 60, don't mistake that as loss. It's your brain finally whispering what it's been trying to tell you all along, that the deepest happiness isn't in the next thing, but in this moment. There comes a moment in life, often quietly after 60, when desire begins to feel different. The things that once pulled us forward with urgency, success, approval, adventure, even pleasure itself, no longer have the same grip. It's not that we stop caring, it's that our brain starts caring differently. The chase slows, the craving softens, and we begin to sense something profound, that maybe fulfillment was never waiting at the finish line, but resting somewhere inside us all along. For decades, dopamine was the driver of our lives. It told us that happiness was something to pursue, that satisfaction always lived one step ahead. Each goal, each reward, each little hit of validation gave us that temporary surge, the beautiful illusion that we were almost there. But dopamine never lets us arrive. It's the chemistry of next, not now. It keeps us wanting more, even when more stops making sense. After 60, something changes deep inside the brain's reward system. Dopamine still fires, but its echo is quieter. The drive to chase fades, and in that space, another system starts to rise, the serotonin system. Serotonin doesn't push us to go after things. It helps us appreciate what we already have. It's the chemistry of contentment, of peace, of presence. The shift from dopamine to serotonin is not loss, it's evolution. This is why people often say, I don't need much anymore. It's not resignation, it's wisdom. The brain is teaching you that joy is no longer about intensity, it's about meaning. Instead of needing constant novelty, you start craving depth. Instead of more stimulation, you want more connection. You realize that the most beautiful experiences are rarely the loudest ones. They're the ones that leave you still, silent, and grateful. And yet, this transition can feel strange at first. We've been conditioned to believe that happiness equals excitement, that we must always be chasing something, a dream, a goal, a thrill. So when the desire to chase begins to fade, many feel lost, even afraid. But what's really happening is liberation. You're not losing motivation, you're shedding illusion, the illusion that more is the answer. In this stage of life, you begin to see how exhausting the pursuit of endless wanting truly was. You start noticing beauty in things that never demanded attention before. The steady rhythm of your breath, the way light falls on your hands, the quiet laughter of someone you love. These moments don't spike dopamine, they awaken peace. This is the shift from desire to contentment, from chasing to cherishing, from seeking to seeing. It's not a smaller life, it's a truer one. When you stop asking what's next and start asking what's here, everything changes. The world slows down, but your heart wakes up. And in that stillness, you realize that contentment was never the end of the journey. It was the destination all along. There's a word that starts to echo more often after 60, emptiness. It creeps in quietly, sometimes between conversations, sometimes in the middle of a perfectly ordinary day. You sit in the same chair, drink the same coffee, and suddenly you feel a stillness that used to be filled with motion. For some, that stillness feels like loneliness. For others, it feels like loss. But what if that emptiness isn't a sign of decline? What if it's the beginning of transformation? For most of our lives, we've been taught to fill every gap, to chase, to build, to achieve, to keep the mind busy so the silence doesn't catch us. Dopamine has been the fuel behind it all, that restless energy pushing us to seek the next thing that promises satisfaction. But dopamine is a demanding friend. It never lets us rest. It whispers, "You'll be happy when," and then moves the finish line just a little farther away. As we grow older, the brain begins to resist this endless chase. The same circuits that once sparked excitement now crave recovery. The system slows, not because it's breaking down, but because it's searching for balance. And in that slowing, in that gentle pulling back, we meet emptiness. Not as a punishment, but as a teacher. That feeling of quiet disconnection is the brain's way of resetting its internal rhythm. When dopamine fades, it leaves behind space, a pause between what was and what's next. It's in that pause that transformation begins. The emptiness you feel is the mind detoxing from decades of stimulation. It's the nervous system learning to live without constant reward. At first, it can feel uncomfortable. You may ask, why don't I feel excited anymore? Why does everything seem dull? But that dullness is actually a kind of healing. It's the brain moving from survival mode into presence. It's shedding its dependency on external highs and starting to listen to subtler forms of joy, peace, purpose, connection, gratitude. Think of it like a forest after a storm. When the noise fades and the ground is still, growth begins quietly beneath the surface. The same thing happens in your brain. In the quiet, new pathways form. One's not driven by craving, but by calm. You start to notice the texture of the world again, the hum of morning air, the sound of your own breathing, the weight of a hand you hold. These are not dopamine highs, they are signals of restoration. Emptiness isn't the end of pleasure, it's the doorway to a deeper kind of contentment. It's your brain saying, you've gathered enough, now it's time to feel what you already have. When you stop fighting the stillness and start listening to it, you realize it's not hollow at all. It's full of everything you were too busy to notice before. So when life feels quieter after 60, don't rush to fill the silence. Sit in it. Let it breathe. Because sometimes the silence isn't the absence of meaning. It's the sound of your brain finally coming home. There's a certain kind of suffering that comes not from what life takes away, but from what we refuse to let go of. After 60, many people begin to feel this quiet friction, the tension between what the brain is ready to release and what the heart still clings to. We resist the slowing down, the quieting of desires, the change in what feels rewarding. But resisting this shift is where pain truly begins. For most of our lives, we've been conditioned to chase stimulation. Society rewards productivity, ambition, motion. You are taught to measure your worth by how much you do, how much you earn, how much you achieve. But the brain was never designed for constant acceleration. It was built to balance pleasure and pain, to move between excitement and rest. When we try to keep the dopamine machine running forever, it eventually breaks down. After 60, the brain sends signals that it's time to rebalance. The reward circuits naturally become less sensitive, and the nervous system begins craving stillness. But instead of honoring that message, many of us fight it. We try to recreate the same highs that once defined us through work, shopping, scrolling, food, alcohol, even relationships. We push against the natural rhythm of aging, trying to trick the brain into feeling young again, and in doing so, we create the very suffering we're trying to avoid. Every time we chase an old thrill that no longer fits our stage of life, we're teaching the brain to depend on artificial stimulation. We light up the dopamine system for a moment, but it crashes harder each time. The highs become shorter, the lows deeper. This is the cycle of modern addiction, not just to substances, but to doing. The more we resist change, the more we suffer. But the truth is, the slowing down of the dopamine system isn't a failure. It's mercy. It's your brain protecting you from burnout. It's giving you a chance to experience a deeper kind of joy, one that doesn't rely on chasing, one that doesn't fade when the excitement wears off. When you stop running from the change, something shifts. The anxiety starts to soften. The noise in your head quiets. You begin to see beauty in the things you used to overlook. A conversation feels richer. A moment of silence feels sacred. The brain starts to reward stillness instead of stimulation. That's not decline, that's evolution. Resisting the change keeps you trapped in a loop of craving. Accepting it opens the door to freedom. The science is clear. Every time you allow yourself to rest in the present, without reaching for another hit of dopamine, your brain rewires itself for balance. You begin to feel whole, not because you're achieving more, but because you finally understand that you don't need to. So if life feels different after 60, don't fight it. Don't chase what used to make you happy. Instead, lean into the quiet, because that's where true peace begins. In the end, the only real suffering comes from trying to stay the same when your brain is ready to grow wiser. There comes a point in life when stillness stops feeling like emptiness and starts feeling like peace. After 60, many people describe this quiet recognition, a sense that what once felt urgent no longer does, and what once felt small suddenly feels sacred. The rush fades, but in its place comes something far more profound: connection. Real, gentle, human connection. And for the first time, the brain begins to understand that this, not excitement, not novelty, not adrenaline, was the reward it was always searching for. When we are younger, our lives are built around motion. We chase things that light up the dopamine system, the thrill of achievement, the spark of desire, the comfort of approval. It's intoxicating. Dopamine gives us energy, drive, and focus, but it also keeps us restless. It whispers, more will make you happy. But after 60, the brain begins to quiet that voice. The dopamine circuits slow down, and other neurochemicals, serotonin, oxytocin, endorphins, begin to take the lead. These are the chemicals of calm, connection, and belonging. They don't push you to seek, they help you to feel. This is why a walk with a friend, a hug from a grandchild, or the sound of birds in the morning starts to mean more than a night of excitement ever could. Your brain has changed what it values. It no longer wants intensity, it wants authenticity. It no longer chases stimulation, it craves presence. Stillness becomes its own kind of high, not the kind that spikes and crashes, but one that lingers quietly in the background, steady and warm. Neuroscience tells us that in moments of calm awareness, the parasympathetic nervous system activates. Heart rate slows, cortisol drops, and oxytocin rises. The body literally shifts into healing. You are not bored, you are repairing. Connection deepens that healing. When you sit with someone and truly listen, your brain releases oxytocin, the bonding hormone. It reinforces trust, empathy, and safety. That's why conversations that go beyond small talk feel so nourishing. They remind your brain that you belong, that you matter, that being seen is its own medicine. And here's the irony. The peace that comes from stillness and connection is far more sustainable than any pleasure dopamine ever gave. It doesn't need repetition to feel good. It doesn't fade when the moment ends. It roots itself in memory, in meaning, in gratitude. The world will still tempt you with noise, with endless scrolling, more possessions, more distraction. But when you've lived enough, you begin to see that stillness isn't the absence of life. It's the fullness of it. It's the space where your mind stops running and your heart starts listening. After 60, life invites you to trade stimulation for serenity, craving for contentment, and wanting for wonder. The science explains it clearly. Your brain is teaching you how to be whole. And when you finally stop chasing and start connecting, you realize the greatest reward was never out there. It was always here, in the quiet, waiting for you to notice. This is why many people describe a sense of emptiness or quiet in their 60s. It's not depression, it's transformation. The pleasure-pain balance that governs all human motivation begins to tilt toward balance itself. The brain finally starts asking a different question, not what can I get, but what's worth keeping. The danger comes when we try to fight that change, when we chase the same dopamine hits from decades ago through consumption, distraction, or even substances. That fight against nature often leads to anxiety, addiction, and a feeling of disconnection. Because what the brain is asking for after 60 isn't stimulation, it's stillness. In stillness, dopamine finds harmony again. The quiet conversation, the walk in the morning light, the act of giving without expectation, these moments begin to deliver a deeper kind of pleasure, one that's sustainable. The neuroscience is clear. As the brain's dopamine pathways slow, our oxytocin and serotonin pathways become more powerful. Connection replaces craving. Gratitude replaces grasping. So if life feels different after 60, it's because your brain is trying to show you a truth that society rarely teaches. That peace is not the absence of pleasure, but the balance between wanting and being. This is the wisdom of aging. It's not about losing excitement. It's about discovering contentment. The science explains it, but the experience completes it. And when you finally stop chasing every high, you discover something that dopamine alone could never give you, joy that doesn't depend on more.